Is President Trump a racist?
Well, look, when you talk about his statement on that, when you talk about him calling African countries S-hole countries, when you talk about him referring to immigrants as rapists and murderers, I don't think you can reach any other conclusion.
Can you tell me how much responsibility you feel specifically to black voters, and given how much is at stake right now?
I feel a great deal of responsibility, a profound responsibility on a number of levels. Listen, part of what I know is that those of us who have been blessed to have opportunities, there are a lot of people who take pride in us being in a place where we have these opportunities. They take inspiration from it, and we should not ever disappoint them.
Absolutely.
And, and to whom each is given, right, much is expected. And I'll tell you also, look, I fully intend to win this election, but my definition of success for this campaign will be, yes, winning, and that through the process of running this campaign, we will have uplifted folks. We will have highlighted them. We will have shared the stage. We will have helped to mobilize and organize so that at the end of it, there is something that has been achieved in addition to the win.
Overwhelming majority of people feel that the president is a flat-out racist. I just want to ask you, how do you feel Trump's racism and his bigotry has personally affected you?
I mean, look, when I looked at what happened in Charlottesville, and I watched people marching and chanting and with these tiki torches and the hate coming from their mouths. And you didn't even have to have the volume on, by the way, to see the hate and hear it. You could hear the hate with no volume on and feel it. And then for the leader of the nation to equate the both sides gave me an incredible amount of pain and concern. Pain about the fact that it had happened at all, and that the leader of the country, according to title, would characterize what we were observing in the way that he did.
I noticed you didn't say president.
Well, he was elected president. I mean, obviously not by popular vote, but he was elected. But the reality of it is that, and we can get into a longer discussion about what a leader really is, right? You can be elected, but if you actually are a leader, then you don't condone and support and counsel hate. You call bigotry what it is. You call racism what it is. You call violence what it is.
Is President Trump a racist?
Well, look, when you talk about his statement on that, when you talk about him calling African countries S-hole countries, when you talk about him referring to immigrants as rapists and murderers, I don't think you can reach any other conclusion.
So you definitely would agree that he's a racist?
I do, yes, yes, yes. In the United States Senate, I wrote a bill that was co-sponsored by the two other members of the Senate Black Caucus, which is what we call ourselves, Senator Booker and Senator Scott, and passed by unanimous consent, a bill that will finally, if it passes the House of Representatives, make lynching a crime in this country.
What does that say about the America that you want to lead, that this is not a federal crime already? What does that say about America?
That we still have a lot of work to do, that we still have real issues about not only vestiges of the past, but we have issues in terms of what is currently happening in this country. And we've got to acknowledge and address it. What it says to me is that we still have to be fighters for the truth. Even when speaking that truth makes a lot of people uncomfortable.
It makes a lot of people uncomfortable, and they're not ready to have it. And that goes back to many of the people who voted for Trump. Do you feel that it's worthwhile to even pursue the votes from people who voted for Trump despite all the racist things that he has said?
I'm going to compete for every vote. Not everybody will vote for me, but I'm going to compete for every vote. And as far as I'm concerned, the issues that have the most impact on the largest majority of people. And I'm going to speak to those issues. And if people agree with me, they will vote for me. But on the issue of race in America, let's be very clear that we had years where people were talking about, are we a post-racial society, which I have rejected from the moment that discussion began. No, we are not. Race is still a big issue in America. I have talked about how, this term, identity politics. You've probably heard it. People start talking about identity politics. It's like talking about the race card, right? Which is when you start hitting on that topic, people throw out that label to shut you up or to marginalize the significance of what you're talking about. So the most recent era of that, right, of the race card, you don't hear people talking about that anymore. What they say is they talk about identity politics. In particular, when you're talking about race, or you're talking about religion, or you're talking about sexual orientation, that's identity politics. I gave a speech a few months back, and I said, look, I reject that label because it seems to me it is brought up whenever we are talking about civil rights issues. And it is with the intention to shut us up or to marginalize the importance of the conversation. Because check this out, 2 things. One, where we as a country stand on these issues is about America's identity, right? Mm-hmm. 2, so 2016, this is public information. I'm a member of Senate Intelligence Committee, but I'm telling you what is not only, I'm telling you what is public information. The intelligence community of the United States government has, by unanimous consent, agreed Russia interfered in the election of President of the United States. What you know about the information that has been shared, publicly shared, is that they tested out different issues, different subjects, to see what would cause tension, what would draw heat, to make the American public fight with each other. And the issue that attracted the most heat was race. So what does that tell us? Not only is the subject of race and how we acknowledge and deal with it a function of America's identity, it is also a matter of national security. Because an adversarial country, Russia, figured out that the subject of race is America's Achilles heel.
Obviously, people have been talking about your time as a prosecutor and attorney general, etc. You supported a law that would send parents to jail if their children miss too many days of school. No parents are jailed, but I think the issue is people are concerned with is that was a consideration in order to deal with the truancy issue.
So when I was district attorney, I did an analysis of who the homicide victims were who are under the age of 25. The vast majority of whom were young black men. Because there was always, when there was an increase in murders, talk about putting more cops on the street, more gang enforcement, all that. And I said, but wait, who are these victims? Who are they? And the information came back to me, 94% of them were high school dropouts. I then went over to the school district and I asked the superintendent of schools, what is going on? And she told me that of the chronically and habitually truant students, 40% were elementary school students who are missing 50, 60, up to 80 days of a 180-day school year.
So the argument is that why couldn't you have come up with a more creative way? Because in effect, putting the threat of jail puts those parents in contact with the schools. Would you, now, because we're not relitigating the past, so what I'm more concerned with is like, what ways would you have addressed that issue, knowing what you know now and knowing that...
Yeah, you know what? Let me just say this. When I did it, I knew I was going to take a political hit. And the people around me said, don't do it because you are going to pay a price for this in terms of whatever future you want in politics. Mm-hmm. And I said, look, I'm prepared to play the bad guy on this. I do not intend to put any parent in jail, and no parent went to jail. But the school district, society, this community, everyone, including our business community, others, have got to take seriously the education of these children and give the parents the resources that they deserve and need. And that's what ended up happening. We improved attendance by over 30%, and not a parent went to jail. There was not enough work happening to notice that that child has not been in class for 80 days. Why isn't everyone up in arms? Why aren't they noticing that that child is not in school every day and saying, we've got to take this seriously? And I'm going to tell you why. Because in my experience of watching the issue, they didn't think that child was capable of much. And I'm not talking about the parents, I'm talking about the system. I'm talking about the system. The system assumed that that child might not be in school every day. And so that was my focus. Okay. My focus was never to criminalize the parents.
Why did you decide to want to be a DA anyway? Because you're catching a lot. People, when they hear DA, you're getting most of your criticism about that. So I just want to ask you, what do you think people most misunderstand about your role, and why did you want to be one in the first place?
Yeah. Listen, I have heard the criticism. I understand the criticism.
It's a fear thing. It's a fear thing. People are worried that when you become president, that you would not really look critically at the structures and the racist institution that it is in order to, that's the fear.
Those are the reasons I became a prosecutor. Because I understood that. I understood this was a system that has a profound impact on the community in which I was raised and on whole communities of people based on where they live or how they look. And it was my strong belief. I had these conversations before I made the decision with my family, with friends. They were like, Kamala, what are you about to do? And I said, look, the system is so powerful. Is there not a role and a legitimacy to us being inside, where we can have the power to make the decisions where the decisions are being made? But having the power to be inside the room allowed me to create Back on Track, which was one of the first reentry initiatives in the country, focused on getting young men, in particular young men, out of the criminal justice system and into jobs and job training and education. And when I created Back on Track, now remember 2004, this was 15 years ago. People would say to me, why are you letting people out when you're supposed to be locking them up? I would stand in rooms of DAs saying, it is smart, it is right that we will create reentry initiatives. And they would ask me, what does reentry mean?
You now support marijuana legalization, but you, back in 2014, you necessarily, your mind wasn't at that point yet. And I'm just curious as to what changed your mind.
Well, I have always been in support of medical marijuana since the very beginning. In fact, I've personally known people who were very sick and only benefited from its use. In terms of wholesale legalization of marijuana, I am in support of that. I believe that we need to change the schedule so that it can be investigated in terms of research around the effect of it on the brain, in particular the developing brain. But it's an issue where, listen, we have come a long way. Back when I supported legalization of medical marijuana, there were very few who, especially in a position of being a prosecutor, would have supported it or did support it. But look, the way that I feel about it is that we have a lot of young black and brown men in particular that have been incarcerated for it in disproportionate rates as compared to their white counterparts in terms of both use and sales. We are looking at it in terms of what we need to do to recognize that it is, in terms of the schedule, we're treating it as some of the most harsh and severe drugs, and it's got to be changed on the schedule. And frankly, the war on drugs was a failure. So that's how I feel about it. In terms of how I've evolved to say, look, given the cost benefit of it, right? Because part of what I've always been concerned about is legalizing it and not knowing the effect on children. Part of my concern, which still remains a concern, is that when our young people are using it, I think we need to have some idea of what might be permanent impact. And if we don't study it, though, and we don't legalize it, we can't study it. And that's one of the reasons that I think, you know what? There may be some harm, but the benefit of legalizing it is worth the harm.
Recently, you supported FOSTA. There are many sex workers who feel that law wasn't insensitive to their lives. What is your response to that?
Well, you should know my history on the issue. I mean, back when I was DA, and remember, I was elected DA over 15 years ago, actually. I took office in 2004, and I was advocating then that we have to stop arresting these prostitutes and instead go after the Johns and the pimps, because we were criminalizing the women, but not the men who associated with it and making money off of it and profiting off of it. I started, even before I was elected DA, so this would have been 2000, 2002, a whole coalition that was focused on what I called sexually exploited youth, which other people were calling teenage prostitutes, because the system was arresting these young people instead of understanding that they needed to be in a safe place. And so we advocated for safe houses instead of incarceration of these young people. So this is my history with the issue. In terms of Backpage, similarly, Backpage was providing advertisement for the sale of children, of minors. And unlike Craigslist, which said we're going to stop doing it, the people who were running Backpage basically thumbed their nose at us and kept doing it, making money off of the sale of youth. And so I called for them to be shut down. And I have no regrets about that. Now, on the issue of providing a safe place for sex workers, I am a huge advocate for that, always have been.
Do you think that sex work ought to be decriminalized?
I think so. I do. I think that we have to understand, though, that it is not as simple as that. It is also about there is an ecosystem around that includes crimes that harm people. And for those issues, I do not believe that anybody who hurts another human being or profits off of their exploitation should be admonished or should be free of criminal prosecution. But when you're talking about consenting adults, I think that, yes, we should really consider that we can't criminalize consensual behavior as long as no one is being harmed. But at the point that anyone's being harmed or exploited, then I think we have to understand that's a different matter.
Should Black people get reparations?
I think there has to be some form of reparations, and we can discuss what that is. But look, we're looking at more than 200 years of slavery. We're looking at almost 100 years of Jim Crow. We're looking at legalized segregation and in fact segregation on so many levels that exist today based on race. And there has not been any kind of intervention done, understanding the harm and the damage that occurred, to correct course. And so we are seeing the effects of all of those years play out still today.
As president, you would be willing to lead a conversation on what reparations for Black people would look like?
Yeah, including things like what we should be doing to take very seriously undiagnosed and untreated trauma. Take that very seriously. And what kind of resources are we going to put in that? What kind of resources are we going to put in communities to help folks heal and be on an equal footing? You cannot tell me that everyone is equal in a society when everyone doesn't have an equal path to opportunity for success. And if we are pretending to be and say we are a society that values equality under law, look, right across the street is the United States Supreme Court. In that marble is inscribed, equal under law. Well, if everyone is equal, if that is a concept that we value, which we say we do, part of the foundational values and ideals of our country, equality, then we have to understand we're not all being born and we're not all living on equal ground in terms of opportunity for success. And certain things are a result of the dark history, the history of crime that has occurred in this country. And we're not going to be able to correct course without serious intervention. And so we need to have that conversation about what that intervention should look like.
Presidential candidate, Senator Kamala Harris.
That's me. It's good to be with you. It's good to be with you.
As well.